AEW Dynamite Grand Slam. Can you hear this Malachi Black music in the background? I hope you can. Notice how there's a slow build, a tease. And then he rises. That is how you build a program. It's a show. You start with something and it should end at a climax. It should end at the big pop. It should end with the big moment. And this track is the best example. It's beautiful. It starts just how his entrance starts and it ends with an explosion. And this. And that is not how AEW Dynamite Grand Slam went. So my hot take on it is very simple. I enjoyed the show. The hype for it was almost too much. This was not a pay-per-view. It was a regular wrestling show that had, it took place in a venue that had never hosted wrestling before. And they went with that and ran with it. I have no problem with the marketing. I have no problem with any of that. Personally, I thought it was a good show. It was just another good episode of Dynamite. But good, I think, is the apropos word because it wasn't special because of the structure. It started with the main event. And it ended with an okay match. Now, I don't know if Tony Khan is trying to make a political statement. I don't know if AEW is desperately trying to counter the women's revolution or evolution from a few years ago or what. I don't know. But I don't understand, of all the people who have come over from WWE to AEW, why is Ruby Soho in the main event? Why is it Ruby Soho against Britt Baker? Britt Baker is one of the best things going in wrestling and let alone AEW. Why? Her character's great. And I love that she's got Reba and I love that she's got this other girl now and everything with her is smooth as butter and it's gold, right? No question. But you knew Bryan Danielson versus Kenny Omega. That's your world heavyweight championship. You knew that was the main event. And they took the full 30 minutes in the match. They took it to the actual 30-minute time limit. And if you knew that's what you were going to do, why didn't you put that at the end of the show? And I hate to do this because I don't want to sound like a Nancy when it comes to AEW. I like AEW. I've been watching. I've been paying for their pay-per-views. I mean, I've been watching it. But there's stuff I don't like. I'm not going to pretend to like things I don't. And this is where Tony Khan loses out on not being Vince McMahon and where the AEW product loses out on not having Vince McMahon. If this were WWE, I think Vince would have clearly said, okay, the main event is not going to be Ruby Soho versus Britt Baker. That's not the main event of this show. We've put too much hype into it. Bryan Danielson is the bigger star between he and Ruby Soho. And Kenny Omega is the bigger star between Britt Baker and Kenny Omega. Maybe not by that much, but certainly he is the bigger star. He's the world heavyweight champion. He's LeBron James in AEW right now. So how can you justify putting them at the beginning of the show? I understand you want to start hot. You don't think if MJF's music hit and that was the first thing that the fans heard, they would have gotten a great pop? The fans told you that was the main event. Their reaction to just the tie-up at the beginning was incredible. That actually got me even more excited. The fans were incredible at this show. One of my buddies was at this show. All right, so I'm biased there, but I don't know. In all seriousness, this fan base was on fire for AEW. They were on fire in the heart of WWE country. They were on fire. When Kenny and Danielson locked up, the fans went nuts. Every move that Danielson did, the fans went nuts. Every move Omega did, the fans went nuts. They never got out of it. Right to the very end. And the ending made sense. I get it. Kenny's still your champ. Danielson just walked in the door. You're not going to hand him the belt. I get it. Everything they did, no problem with that. Khan, whoever put that together, whoever made the decisions there, everything, that just made perfect sense. But where you're really losing me is, why is that the opening match? You could have started with MJF. MJF music hits, the fans go crazy booing him. They love to boo him. You get the energy going. Then the next match could have been the Britt Baker Soho match, or you could have gone to the Cody Rhodes Malachi Black. You could have started with Malachi Black. You could have started with the lights going out. Everybody knowing, oh, here he comes. And like you heard with the music, that slow build. That slow build into the explosion. That's how they could have started. So you had other options. I just don't understand, why are you shooting your main event out in the first match? Because, no disrespect to the rest of the card, but nothing was going to follow that. Even CM Punk said, hey, I don't want to follow that. That has to be the last match. But that's where not having a Vince McMahon hurts. Because you don't have that authority figure to offend Ruby Soho and Britt Baker and say, you can't be the main event. I'm sorry. And they can take it however they want to take it. But they're not the main event. They're not. And by the way, their match was just average. It was fine. It wasn't the greatest match I've ever seen. And it needed to be the greatest match I'd ever seen to justify being in that spot. So it was a disappointment. And the ending was just same old. Okay, Britt got her move in. She did her thing. I mean, that's not Britt's strength. Britt's strength is her mic skills, her character, and she has to win with some quirks, and that's fine. But she's not a durable wrestler. She's not built. She's not jacked up. She doesn't look like she goes to the gym that much. I'm sorry. She's not the type of, she's not like Jade Cargill. Okay? She's not Charlotte Flair. She's not Raquel Gonzalez. She's not that kind of wrestler. Those girls look like they work out their character. Camille in NWA, it's another example. Those girls, they work out, their character has a lot to do with their body and their strength. That's not Britt Baker. Britt Baker's character is that she's a dentist, she's a professional doctor, she believes she's smarter and better than you. She's a female MJF, basically. And that's great. It works for her. I love it. That's not a knock. But I'm just saying, that's her strength. And that the problem is, when your strength is your character and your mic skills, and it's not necessarily that you're going to take huge bumps or... I mean, look, she does get hurt a lot, right? She does. She gets nicked up, and they all get nicked up. But she is not a body that I would say, oh, we're going to pound this girl to the ground and she's going to still be our champ. You know, she's sort of an injury waiting to happen. Whereas some of the other ones, you could say, okay, their ring work is what's going to get them through. So that's the main event. The main event in this company, which is basically all based on match to match, is based around the ring work. This is not a company, not that they have terrible storylines, not that they have bad characters, they don't. It's not a problem. But their strength is they are an American New Japan, right? That's what they want it to be. So everything is built around being elite wrestlers. It's in your name, All Elite Wrestling. And Britt Baker is not an elite wrestler. She's not physically the best wrestler. I'm not going to get into the technicality because I'm not going to pretend to know that and be a smart mark. But I'm just saying, when I think of Britt Baker, I think of her character. When I think of Camille, when I think of Raquel Gonzalez, Charlotte Flair, I think of their wrestling. Okay? That's the difference. That's the difference. When I think of those other ones, I'm thinking about their wrestling. Yeah, their character matters, but their character is based on the wrestling. Britt Baker's wrestling is based on the character. The lockjaw finisher, the stomp, everything is based around her character. And that's great. That's what you're supposed to do. But her strength is not being a main event wrestler. Bryan Danielson and Kenny Omega represent exactly what your brand is. They are literally right on the nose of what your brand is in All Elite Wrestling. When you think about All Elite Wrestling, you think of the middle-sized to slightly undersized, super athletic, modern style, hybrid New Japan strong style wrestler. They are the identical thing that your brand is. Everybody knows it. It's not Cody Rhodes, okay? It's not the Murder Hawk Monster. It's not Wardlow. It's not Hobbs. It's not even Brian Cage. It's really Kenny Omega and Bryan Danielson. It would have been Chris Jericho 25 years ago. It's that middle-sized to slightly undersized, super athletic guy who can do anything you ask in the ring, who's going to take a lot of physical chances, do a lot of stuff that makes you scared, and does it at a fast pace, and can hit on that, stereotypical Dave Meltzer 4 or 5 star rating type. That's the stereotype of what an AEW wrestler is. They are literally the elite version of that. They are the top dogs of that type of wrestling. We all know it. Even more than Jon Moxley. Even more than Moxley. Moxley is a little closer to a Vince McMahon style wrestler, with a hardcore twist, than he is an AEW styled wrestler. And AEW is trying to give you the buffet, like Cody said. They're trying to give you the little bit of everything. And they do. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with any of this. But you could have had a show that made more sense if you finished with Omega and Danielson. You could have had Omega and Danielson in promos earlier in the night. You could have had them backstage interaction. You could have had a backstage fight. There's a lot you could have done to build to that main event. To start with that match just didn't make sense to me. And I felt like it did hurt the show because there was a slow decline in energy, and I could feel it from my couch. There was a slow decline. It never got bad because the show never got bad. But there was a slow decline in energy from the fans from that first match. And if you asked CM Punk, I think he would have even told you that. Because he kind of hinted that hey, I don't want to follow that. I don't think he was kidding. I think he was dead serious. This should have been the end of the night. Getting beyond that, I thought MJF did his thing. Look, I think Brian Pillman Jr., there's just something missing from him. He doesn't have the edge. He looks like he should have the edge with his haircut. He talks a little bit like he should have the edge, but it's not there. He's not his dad. He's not his dad. He's not the loose cannon. And that's fine. I don't need him to be his father. But there's something missing from this guy. And I think that the AEW decision makers, whether that be Tony Khan or Dean Malenko, whoever's booking the program, I almost felt like they put him with MJF for two reasons. One, MJF is a hot commodity for AEW, so now he can give back by giving a rub to some of the other talent, right? He's already been established, so he can help to lift some of the other talent. He doesn't need to work with Chris Jericho anymore. He doesn't need to work with any top star. He himself can help lift up some of the other guys, especially the younger guys. And they have some chemistry from their MLW days. So I thought that was part one of that. Part two of it was that if you put a guy like MJF with a guy like Pillman Jr., maybe he'll bring out the aggression in him. Insulting his family. And I'm not just saying from a storyline perspective, like the character. His character, MJF's character, is insulting to Pillman's character. So within the show, within the story, you're expecting the wrestler to be insulted. You're expecting the wrestler to get upset, to take it personally. But what I really was looking for, and I think the decision makers at AEW might have been looking for it too, was to get Brian Pillman Jr. out of that shell a little bit. Yeah, he's got the Bearcat like claws on his pants. He's got the cool mullet. You know, he looks like he's ready to kick ass. But there's something missing from this guy. There's some element of Brian Pillman Jr. that just doesn't resonate. And I think it actually does affect him with the crowd. The crowd wants to like him. The crowd wants to get behind him. He wants to be this aggressive, loose cannon type. But he is about 4 or 5 steps short of where Jon Moxley is. And Jon Moxley is the real loose cannon. Like, if you had to pick a wrestler today who embodies what Brian Pillman embodied in his day, it's Moxley. And it's funny that they're both from Cincinnati, right? And I don't know if that's... I'm sure he had some influence over Moxley. And it's almost like that just didn't translate to Pillman Jr. It just went right to Moxley. And I feel like that's hurting him. Now, I don't know if you need to put them together, or maybe it's just not his character. You know, maybe he needs to be a heel. Maybe he needs to say, I don't want to be a loose cannon. I don't want to be my dad. I'm trying so hard to be my dad. And the truth is, he pilled out and left us, you know, in the lurch. He almost ruined my life. I don't want to be him. I'm Brian Pillman Jr. I'm my own man. And maybe he should wear a suit. Maybe he should wear a polo. Maybe he should act differently. Maybe he should be preppy. I don't know. Or if he wants to be a street kind of guy and say, hey, I was left to fend for my own on the streets, and he wants to go with that, then somehow that has to connect better. Somehow that has to be absorbed through his character and expressed out to the fans. Because this last 3 weeks were the biggest 3 to 4 weeks of Pillman Jr.'s life in the wrestling world, and it has not clicked. And last night, having him lose, my knee-jerk reaction when I watched was like, oh, he lost? Because if he loses that after Jim Ross basically insulted him in their promo or in their interview last week, where he said, your family was embarrassed, kid, you got to step up. And to have him lose, it just felt like, wow, MJF totally owns this guy. And if MJF lost the match, would it really hurt him that much? But it would have given Pillman Jr. something. But maybe they just look at Pillman Jr. and say, you're not ready to win this match. Your character isn't ready. Physically, you're ready. Maybe mentally, you're ready. But your character isn't ready. It's not translating. So that's something that AEW and Tony Khan, they have to work on. They have to find a way to get more out of Brian Pillman Jr.'s character, to get that edge that they're trying to bring out of him. That has to translate. Or you have to start to look at going in a different direction with him and with his character. I'm sure I'm not remembering the order of the show, but that doesn't matter. I'm just, the things that stick out to me is really all I should talk about, because this isn't a forced talk show. I'm not here to just run down the gauntlet. And unlike some programs where people are just going to kiss the butt of whatever promoter or topic there is, I'm just speaking from the heart. And, you know, it shouldn't be offensive to anybody, but it's just, it has to be natural for this to work. So I'm sure I'm forgetting something. Okay, so now Cody Rhodes, Malachi Black. I thought that could have opened the show. Really, really interesting stuff here. I don't know if they're trying to do it or not, but Cody Rhodes is a heel now. He's a heel because the fans just don't like him, and I don't know why. I'm gonna guess they don't like him because they know he's the boss or he's a boss. I'm gonna guess they don't like him because he has a TV show with Brandy, and it feels like they work really hard on building a story around themselves rather than just being part of the show. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because Cody's not really part of the elite. He wasn't a longtime member of that group of friends. He didn't spend forever in New Japan and Ring of Honor. He was sort of a Johnny Come Lately to them, and maybe the fans just don't cling to him in that way. Maybe it's his style. He's not a fully new edge type guy. He's not going to hit you with 1,000 chops, super kicks, planchas, tope suicidas, all that flippy floppy stuff. He's a real wrestler. He tries to wrestle a different style, and maybe the fans don't. I don't know. There's some part of him that they don't like, and it's been on a slow crescendo. When he came back, it didn't have the effect of, oh, we miss you. They loved the action last week, did the fans in Jersey, but you just get the feeling that they don't love him. And last night was to me the peak of it. Malachi Black is supposed to be the bad guy in this, right? He knocked out Coach Arn Anderson. He knocked out Anderson's son. He knocked out Cody and took his boot. I mean, they're building him as the bad guy, and it's not translating. It's not translating at all, actually. The fans love him. They love his entrance. I don't blame him. I love his entrance too. The fans love his look. They know he's another WWE guy who they feel like was wronged in WWE and is getting a fresh start in AEW. Because remember, almost every AEW fan is somebody who either still watches WWE or used to watch WWE. And they all, and not all, I shouldn't say, but a lot of them have a chip on their shoulder the way that some of the AEW wrestlers have, in the sense that they feel like they're bucking the system, especially in New York, where if you're in the Northeast, you're in WWE country. WWE is based in Stamford, Connecticut. WWE has been running shows in this part of the country for about 70 years now. So, this is dating back to Vince McMahon Sr. So when you have another wrestling program, whether it was when New Japan and Ring of Honor did that show in the Garden a couple years ago, where Matt Taven won the title, or whether it's AEW having the first ever show at a venue in New York, the fans there, they really want to impress upon the business that they're excited for something different. And Malachi Black's a representation of that. He is, in some ways, he embodies that former WWE fan wrestler who comes over and gets a fresh start. And look, it's working. His intro, his music, his look, the style, everything clicks for Malachi. I love him. And I should probably do a segment, which I've been thinking about doing, where I'm going to focus in on a wrestler and what I like about them, what I don't, what clicks. I think I pretty much did that with Brian Pillman Jr., who I am a fan of, by the way, but I just had to say what I feel about how it's not working. But as far as Malachi, it's clicking. And I wasn't a huge fan of his in WWE, probably because I just didn't see him a lot and he wasn't presented to me like this. I know fans loved him in NXT, but this is basically a better version of that on a bigger stage. So anyway, he's the good guy, right? He is the guy who the fans are behind in this scenario. And when it comes to Cody, I mean, it's just not clicking at all. I mean, the fans are booing him. Even with Cody, even with Brandy Rhodes returning, and she was coming to the ring with him, it didn't do a lot. He was kind of half booed, but during the match, it got worse. The fans were cheering Malachi Black, and they were booing Cody more and more and more. Now, Cody tried to absorb it. He tried to almost take it in and say, hey, if you're forcing me into a heel turn, I'm going to work a little bit like a heel. He started chopping the leg. I thought that made sense, and that's the mind of Cody at work. I love that. I thought that was great stuff. It felt like he was working the way I would expect him to work if he's being booed. And I thought the match was good because, look, these are two good wrestlers. They're very fun to watch. They both have their own style. Cody's style is in contrast to the stereotype of AEW style. And Malachi Black is really his own style. Malachi Black is not like a lot of the other guys. The kicks are a little different. He doesn't have the same type of kick as Bryan Danielson. He's built a little differently. He's just a very, very interesting character and wrestler. I think he would play really well in their video games, and as somebody they can build some interesting programs around. But anyway, Cody and Malachi, the match itself was pretty good, and the fans, I took away with the fans were so anti-Cody. I'm curious if this translates to Rochester, New York next week. I'm curious if this translates all over the United States, or if this was something that, for some reason, New York, Philly, those are more heel towns, and maybe they just don't like the white meat babyface type. But I think it's a bigger thing than that. I think the fans legitimately like Malachi Black better than Cody Rhodes, and I don't know if they planned it or not, but they made some adjustments to the match, or they made it look like they were adjusting to how the fans were cheering and booing. Now, Cody elbowing the referee in the face, that was pretty interesting. That was a heel thing to do. And then Malachi spitting the mist, that was sort of okay, are you a heel too still? Or was that just something they're going to add to his character? Like Tajiri style, like spitting the mist. I mean, it was an interesting way to end the match. I did think that Cody was going to win only because of the build-up, but maybe that's part of this whole turn, right? Cody could come out next week and say, hey, I took time off to be with my wife and my daughter. I'm working really hard to make this company work for you fans. And then you boo me against some guy who kicked my coach in the head? You boo me against a guy who's disrespectful to my family and to me? You boo me? The hell with you. If you want to cheer a scumbag like Malachi, then you can all go to hell. Like, I could see that coming, but I don't know if they want to go there or not. It'll be interesting to see how they build off this and also what the fan reaction is from this. So there's a lot going on there. That could have opened the night too. So we have two matches, I think, with Malachi and Cody and with MJF and Brian Pillman Jr. Both could have opened the night, and you would have had a nice build towards that main event with doing segments or anything. That's where NXT 2.0 is winning. And I'm not going to make this a comparison because I know that that's offensive and maybe even unfair because they really are in two different situations. But to me, that's where Vince McMahon's style and the build-up worked. And I'm not talking about Raw and SmackDown. That's I don't know what that is. But NXT 2.0 feels like the World Wrestling Federation to me. And the reason why it feels like the World Wrestling Federation to me is because the way it's built. It looks like WCW Worldwide. It looks like WCW Saturday Night. But it feels like the WWF in the sense of how they build the show, how they build the episode. And I feel like you could have built the main event of AEW Dynamite Grand Slam by having the main event players involved in either backstage vignettes, segments, promos, or even interaction at ringside or something. And the rest of the show would have carried. And then you could have done the Britt Baker Soho match, before that, and then ended with the Danielson Kenny Omega match. So, that's my take on it. I still think it was good. I'm very curious to see how this Friday's Rampage goes. Rampage has been solid. I think it flows well. It's an hour, but it has a nice pace to it. It doesn't feel too short. And in contrast to the rest of the wrestling that most people watch, it actually feels nice that it's an hour. This week it'll be 2 hours because, again, they're building up the Grand Slam. So we'll see how that goes. I'm sure the matches will be good. I think one thing about AEW that they're going to learn from, and it's just something that has to grow over time. AEW, it still feels like segments and matches. It doesn't always feel like a connected show. It doesn't always feel like that there's an arc to it as an episode. There's an arc in terms of overarching story, but maybe that's because they have too many wrestlers at this point. They don't have enough time to fit everybody into a show. So they can build a story over a month, but they can't build a story within an episode because they don't have a lot of time to have people have multiple interactions from beginning to end or to feature somebody from beginning to end. They don't have that. And maybe it's a matter of they don't feel like they have one dynamic superstar to build around in that way. But I feel like the number of wrestlers they've brought in, the number of wrestlers on the roster, the fact that they have, AEW Dark Elevation, now they have Rampage, they have Dynamite, and it's literally like every show they have just enough room for somebody. I mean, CM Punk is the top guy in their company right now because of the name brand, and he gets a segment on every show whether he's wrestling or not, and I understand that. But they have to start to figure out how do we have more of an arc within an episode so that we keep and maintain an audience throughout the show and grow the show, grow the popularity. And if you trim some of the fat, maybe you'll find that you actually have a better program than just having every wrestler you could ever think of and having them try to put on the best match every single match. Because a series of matches is just that. It's like what I have when I watch New Japan, it's a series of matches. I don't have a feel for the story. I'm not interested in the characters. I just enjoy the ring work, and that's cool. But it's just a series of matches. It's like watching a pay-per-view and not knowing any of the story. It's a series of matches. But matches are just that. If this is a wrestling show, the wrestling is vital, but you have to have some arc to it and have some understanding. And I think that's where they're going to grow. Like I said, I think overall I would give Dynamite Grand Slam a thumbs up. It was a good wrestling show. Dynamite's been good for a long time. So being good isn't new. They're a good show. They have different styles of wrestling, so there's something for everybody. I will say once again, and I'm going to keep complaining about this until it gets fixed. Wardlow has to have a bigger role. I mean, Wardlow literally is not even on the show. He comes out, he's carrying MJF's bags. This is a waste of talent. I wish Wardlow would leave and go to WWE and be a member of NXT 2.0. It would make more sense. I don't think AEW knows what to do with him, and they're wasting him. They teased at him leaving MJF. I mean, I don't care what you do with him at this point. Do something. Because now he's just becoming, to me, a waste. You know, you have this guy, while he's in his prime, do something with him. You know, it's almost like he's being punished because he's a monster. And they don't have enough monsters to build a program with, or they don't feel like they do. But why can't he get into it with Hager and have a program? Why can't he get into it with the Murderhawk Monster and have a program? There's got to be something you can do with this guy. Right? Let him get into it with Orange Cassidy. Let him get into it with somebody. Do something. I mean, he's just wasted right now. But overall, good show by Dynamite or AEW. I'm sure Rampage will be good, and we'll see where this goes. We'll see how they build out. You know, there's gonna be some changes. There's gonna be some character development. There's gonna be decision making. So, you know, let's see. We'll see what happens. I hope that they continue to grow their audience. I hope that they continue to, to grow the show. I hope that, everything goes well for them and the WWE, because at the end of the day, more wrestling, more competition is a good thing. And no matter what, both companies, I think they stick to the stereotypes. I'm going to leave NXT 2.0 out because NXT 2.0 is phenomenal. But Raw and SmackDown struggle because the WWE is too tight and they have Vince McMahon and they have a lot of writers, and I think the shows are boring, or they don't flow well. But the WWE works because they have Vince McMahon, they have a structure, and they have a final say, and at least it'll be organized, right? My critique of AEW is the same, and I'm going to repeat this every time I do one of these. My critique of AEW is it's too loose. Tony Khan got really excited to have a good match, and he had good matches, but he put them in a terrible order, and it hurt the show a little bit. It was a good show. It could have been a great show if it ended with that main event. But what makes Tony Khan and AEW great is that they have flexibility. They have an owner who's willing to listen, and it seems as though the wrestlers have creative freedom, and there's a platform for wrestlers to do what they do best and to contribute. So both companies have the opposite problems, and both companies have the opposite strengths. The momentum of the business is with AEW, even though the total numbers favor WWE, but the momentum is with AEW. And if you don't admit that, then you're being a fool. AEW is not perfect, but they have momentum. They clearly do. And WWE is working on it. That's why they brought Brock Lesnar back, even though he's a non-factor on the show. And Roman Reigns is great, but Roman Reigns to me is in isolation. And I should talk about Big E. I guess I'll throw a nugget out. I'm going to have to do a separate video on him. But Big E is the right guy, but he's the wrong character right now. I wish he would just be a power lifter. He's doing himself a disservice by being the clown. The New Day will never, in the long run, they'll never be taken seriously as wrestlers or heavyweight champions. And for Big E to have longevity as a wrestler, he has to establish something that brings him respect. People like him, but I don't know if he's respected. And "you deserve it" chants are handed out to the hot dog vendor, let alone the wrestlers these days. So it really means nothing, and I like hot dogs, so no offense. But let's be honest here, like, "you deserve it," they say that for everybody. Everything is fight forever, you deserve it, you still got it. If people didn't have it, didn't deserve it, and they fought for 3 seconds, the fans would still be chanting, "you deserve it, fight forever," and, you still got it. They whether you got it or not, they're going to say you still got it. I mean, let's just call a spade here. They do. The fans want to make the chant, so they're desperate to chant. That's why last night was so special with Danielson and Kenny Omega, and that's why not having an inner show build and not having them in the main event was so terrible, because that was a natural fan reaction. It wasn't a forced "you deserve it." It wasn't a forced "fight forever." It wasn't a forced "this is awesome." Like every time I go to a wrestling show or watch wrestling, there's so many forced chants because the fans want to be able to say that they saw something that deserved that chant, and that, "oh, you still got it, you still got it." The guy could be like cramping up in the ring and taking a shit, or the guy could be like tripping over himself, and they'd still say, "you still got it." Or the guy does like the same plancha that you see 30 times a night, and they'll be like, "this is awesome." Is it awesome? It was awesome in 1980. The Dynamite Kid was awesome. Shawn Michaels was awesome. Is this awesome? Fight forever. Clap, 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 clap. Fight forever. No, let's end the match. End the match. I don't know. I mean, there's so many dishonest and disingenuous and phony chants nowadays that last night was so refreshing because it was unequivocally the most natural excitement I'd seen from a AEW wrestling show in a long time, because that match was so anticipated and executed so well and the fans were so excited. It just needed to be the main event. And if you watch and hear the pop at the tie-up, that's all you need to know. There are going to be people out there who are not going to like the match. There are going to be people who say too many chops. There are going to be people who complain about them. I'm not going to complain about that. I thought it was exciting, and I think the fans enhanced it for me. Watching at home, hearing their reaction to the tie-up was amazing. But let's call a spade here. That should have been the main event, and that really was a deserving match of chance, and you don't have that in a lot of shows. And I'm not just talking about AEW. I'm talking about everywhere. Everywhere in wrestling, people force the "this is awesome." They force the "you still got it." They force the "you deserve it." Not everybody deserves it. Big E's character does not deserve to be champion. But Big E, physically, you could argue, deserves to be considered a champion because he looks like a guy who could hold his own with Bobby Lashley. He looks like a guy who could hold his own with Roman Reigns, right? And we all know his background. So I believe that he could hold his own in a fight with those guys. I believe it. And that's all you got to do. Remember, this is suspension of belief. We don't get to see these guys fight for real. We don't get to see who really wins a technical fight, who wins a slugfest. We don't see that because it's not real. So when Big E wins a title, it's because there's a perception that he should be the champion. Vince McMahon wrote it down on paper, and then it came to life. But when I look at Big E, I look at a guy. Finn Balor's not that guy. When I look at Finn Balor, if you're going to tell me Finn Balor can beat up Roman Reigns, I'm like, come on, man. Stop being stupid. Could Finn Balor win 1 out of 10 fights against Roman Reigns? Possibly. And he should for the sake of being in wrestling, right? That makes sense. You don't want him to get squashed all the time. But if you look at Big E and you look at Finn Balor, I have to say Big E's the guy who I would believe could hold his own with Roman Reigns, even beat him up. But Big E's character, and people didn't like Booker T's comment about, well, you got to take this role a little bit more seriously. And they said, oh, you were King Booker. Okay, he was Booker T, and he was a heavyweight champion long before he was ever King Booker. Big E is not in the same place in his career that Booker T was in his career when he was a champion. So don't compare the two. And Booker is trying to help him out by saying take it more seriously. He should drop the New Day. He should drop any semblance of the New Day. He should just be himself. Let's see if his natural charisma gets over with the fans. I think it would. I don't need fake voice inflection. I don't need your MLK impersonation when you're on the mic. I don't need your booty shaking. You're a heavyweight champion. Don't act like a clown. Act like a champion. Look like a champion. Hold yourself with some grace, some dignity. And then if you want to be a jerk to somebody, mock them. But don't act like a clown and be a jerk to yourself. So that's where Big E has to put in his work. Because that's why Roman Reigns smirked at him. Okay? When Brock Lesnar gets in the ring with him, when Bobby Lashley's facing him eye to eye, he's not going to smirk because he knows, oh, I got a real man in front of me. I got somebody whose character demands a certain reaction. But with Big E's character does not demand the reaction that Brock Lesnar's character demands. Big E's character does not demand the same reaction that Bobby Lashley's character demands. I would even argue his character does not demand the same reaction that Drew McIntyre's character demands. And I keep saying character demands because in pro wrestling, and I bring this up every time I do one of these, and I'm going to continue to bring it up because I don't hear it enough. It's not about who can win a real fight because I don't know. We don't get them to have real fights. It's about the presentation. In MMA, the presentation is important, but you get to see the skill. You get to see the action for real. So the results tell the story. But in wrestling, the presentation tells the story. So whatever the character is being presented as, that is how you dictate how other characters will react to them. That is going to dictate how fans react to them. Why do you think fans love Braun Breaker? Because they know he's Scott Steiner's nephew. He's Rick Steiner's son. When he walks through the door, his character automatically demands a certain response from other wrestlers and from other fans. He looks like he's jacked. He looks like he could kick your ass. And you know who his parent is. You know who his uncle is. And those guys still could kick anybody's ass. So when you see Braun Breaker, your knee-jerk reaction is, whoa. And that's the reaction he gets in the ring. People man up to take him out. But Big E isn't getting that reaction because Big E acts like a clown. And when you act like a clown, your character gets treated like a clown. And I think it's a shame because there's so much more potential in Big E. And there's so much more he could do. He's not the only one. I mean, Matt Riddle is a real fighter. And he acts like a fool too. And I think his character is funny at times, but I was hoping that when they put him with Randy Orton, that they would be bringing Matt Riddle up to Randy Orton's level. They would be having Randy Orton rub off on that kid, like a protege. Instead, it's the opposite. Randy's gotten softer being with Riddle. It's how your character is presented, and that will determine the reaction your character deserves. So, to wrap it up, and I'll do another video where I'll talk more about WWE, because this isn't about WWE, this is really more about AEW. But I just had to get that out, because I was talking to somebody last night about this. And, he was making, I thought he was making good points. He's a wrestling fan. I thought he was making perfect sense and good points. His name is Sam. He's a big wrestling fan. He's from Florida. And he was basically saying that, he felt like, there could be more from Big E. And he was happy Big E had the belt, but he wanted a little bit more from him. And I completely agree. So, AEW Dynamite Grand Slam, good show. Omega retains the title. Spoiler if you didn't watch it already. Omega retains with the time running out of time. So they went the full 30 minutes, I guess, semi-Broadway. Kenny wins. It was a good match. Malachi Black defeats Cody. Cody, basically, the fans treated him like a heel. Let's see what happens. And their TV show debuts next week also, so that should be interesting. What else stood out? Britt Baker, Ruby Soho. The match was very average. There was nothing terrible. It was fine. All her matches are fine, but there wasn't anything that stood out to me. There was nothing spectacular, and I think it's just that you have, Ruby. I don't know very well. To me, she's just another undersized, woman. Maybe her character is interesting, but I don't know. Having tattoos and short hair just isn't unique in wrestling anymore. Her look doesn't warrant anything. There's so many people who have edgy looks that it's not really edgy anymore. But, regardless, I thought she was fine. Britt Baker's great. Her character's great. But the match was fine. It just didn't need to be the main event. So, solid show. I'm sure it did a good rating. We'll see what happens on Rampage. I'm curious if Rampage actually gets a bump in ratings because of all the advertisement as Rampage Grand Slam 2 hours, or if they still get hurt in the ratings because it is 10 to 12, and 10 to 12 reminds me of like when I would watch ECW on MSG like late at night back in the day. That's not like a hot time slot. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But overall, good week for wrestling. It's been fun, and Impact is on tonight. I don't watch it consistently, so I probably won't do a video on it. And then we'll talk about whatever happens on Friday if it was anything that strikes my interest. So peace. Have a good rest of your day, night, whenever you're listening to it. And feel free to check out my channel for more. I'll have videos from my Twitch feed that I copy over here. So I do stuff on different games. If you guys like baseball, I did a deep dive into MLB The Show and their retro mode. I did that because I feel like that's a mode that doesn't get a lot of play, a lot of attention. So I wanted to throw that out there. And really do a deep dive into what I think works for the mode, what improvements are needed, and display it. Because if you did like Ken Griffey Jr. Baseball or any of the old baseball games, RBI Baseball from back in the day, if you like that camera angle and that style, then I think I do think that there's something for you with the retro mode, and it just gets no attention because most people focus on Dynasty and franchise, that kind of thing. So check that video out. Check out anything you like from my channel. Comment. If you hate the topic, whatever. Talk about whatever you feel, and we'll go from there. But otherwise, have a good one, guys. Peace.